Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. We're going to step out of our normal Second Amendment lane, but there is something going on. It's capturing a lot of the country's attention. It is legal in nature, and therefore it gives us a teachable moment or a learning opportunity, more importantly, to educate you about how this process works from a legal standpoint. What are we talking about? We're talking about Judge James Boasberg of the United States District Court. You all know who he is, and listen, here's the problem, is good judges are a lot like good referees in a football game. You just don't really realize they're there. When you're bad, everyone knows you're there, and that's exactly what's going on with Judge Boasberg. But now we have articles of impeachment actually being filed. Does it actually stand a chance? That's what we're going to talk about today. So today, let's spend a few minutes, let's get you educated, and let's talk about how to impeach a judge. Okay, America, we are talking about something that is obviously going to be kind of at the top of everyone's attention for the next couple of days, and that is the Articles of Impeachment filed by Representative Brandon Gill of Texas against United States District Court Judge James Boasberg. Now, you all know who James Boasberg is, and we all know why you know who he is, and nothing really more needs to be said. This stems, however, from the investigation conducted by Special Counsel Jack Smith, known as Operation Arctic Frost. Now, as you may recall, Operation Arctic Frost was an investigation looking into election denial that ultimately spun completely out of control and into ultimately the subpoenaing of many, many phone records of sitting United States senators. And then ultimately, and I want you to remember this, Judge Boasberg signing orders to prevent the telephone companies from notifying the senators that their data was being subpoenaed. I want you to remember that because we're going to circle back on that in just a moment. Okay, the quick legal stuff. What gives the House of Representatives the authority to file articles of impeachment? Well, that's Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. And that is exactly what Representative Brandon Gill of Texas has done. We're going to go through those in just a moment. Now, even if the articles of impeachment are approved by the United States House of Representatives, it will then go over to the Senate for a full-blown trial. The constitutional authority for that comes from Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6. All right, now, has Judge Boasberg made a lot of terrible rulings? Well, I'm sure to this audience the answer is yes, he has, and I agree with that. He has made a litany of absolutely horrific rulings. Can judges be impeached for just being crappy, for just making horrible rulings? Well, if that were the case, we certainly would have a lot of co-occurring impeachment proceedings going on right now, wouldn't we? So while there's nothing that technically restricts that, history has shown us that that never occurs. Go all the way back to 1804 with the then attempted impeachment of Supreme Court Justice Samuel Chase. Now, the charge was led by then President Thomas Jefferson, who had a supermajority in both the House and the Senate. And although the articles of impeachment passed out of the House, the Senate ultimately refused to convict him, finding that although he had made some terrible rulings and had been very vocally critical of President Jefferson, it was only his rulings that were the issue here, and no judge should be impeached merely for making terrible rulings. Fast forward a couple of centuries later, when then Chief Justice William Rehnquist authored a book about judicial impeachment, and in again inquiring can judges be impeached just for making terrible rulings, he opined, early historical uses of the impeachment power established a norm that judicial acts, their rulings from the bench, would not be a basis for removal from office by impeachment and conviction. Okay, so if you can't impeach them for terrible rulings, what sorts of things can they be impeached for? Well, if you take a look at a history of judicial impeachment, you will find that they have been impeached for offenses such as treason, bribery. I don't think we have either of those here. And then what's kind of the catch-all of other high crimes and misdemeanors. And that category is a little bit more all-encompassing because there are certain activities that could be deemed a subcategory of this sort of behavior, such as abuse of power, criminal activity, serious ethical violations, intoxication on the bench, or making false statements. And what I want you all to kind of focus on are these three right here, because when we go through the articles of impeachment, we're going to see that there may be a very good case that that is exactly what's occurred. Okay, the Articles of Impeachment, which essentially would be the charging document if approved by the House of Representatives, drafted by Representative Gill, reads as follows. Ignoring his responsibility to wield the power of his office in a constitutional manner, Chief Judge Boasberg granted Special Counsel John L. Smith authorization to issue frivolous, non-disclosure orders in furtherance of the Federal Bureau of Investigation project codenamed Arctic Frost. These non-disclosure orders covered members of Congress who were acting in accord with their legislative duties and privileges guaranteed by Article 1, Section 6, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. Also known as the Privileges and Immunities Clause. We don't need to geek out on that today. But remember now, what Representative Gill is pointing out is these non-disclosure orders, because that's going to be central to this, okay? We don't know whether or not Judge Boasberg had anything to do with the subpoenaing of these records. We absolutely positively do know that he did sign a multitude of non-disclosure orders, which we will get to. The allegations in the Articles of Impeachment also claim Chief Judge Boasberg authorized the issuance of frivolous non-disclosure orders covering at least these following senators right here. Here's a list of all the senators that would be affected by Judge Boasberg's orders. These illegitimate and frivolous non-disclosure orders and subpoenas threaten members of Congress by imposing undue legal scrutiny for fulfilling their constitutional duties. Now, what brought this whole thing again to light was the non-disclosure order on Senator Ted Cruz's phone records, which got Senator Cruz, for good reasons, really worked up. That becomes a central component here of the Articles of Impeachment. The allegations claim Chief Judge Boasberg signed an order prohibiting AT&T from informing Senator Cruz of his subpoena for at least 1 year. Chief Judge Boasberg expressed that there were reasonable grounds to believe that such disclosure will result in destruction of or tampering with evidence, intimidation of potential witnesses, and serious jeopardy to the investigation. Absolutely no evidence to even support any of those allegations, and that would presume that there was actually something of evidentiary value on Senator Cruz's phone, which there's been no showing of whatsoever. The Articles of Impeachment continue. Chief Judge Boasberg had no clear reasonable basis to make this finding about Senator Cruz, which accused him of being willing to destroy evidence and intimidate witnesses in violation of both the law and Senator Cruz's ethical obligation as a member of the bar. And all of that is true because Senator Cruz was actually a very accomplished attorney before becoming a politician. Now, while all of that sounds pretty salacious, here's the thing. The signing of the non-disclosure orders. And so what's basically happened here is Jack Smith gets to go and subpoena the records from these phone companies. Under federal law, when a phone company is subpoenaed for records belonging to a member of Congress, that phone company is required to notify the staff of that congressperson to let them know, hey, so-and-so is asking for your phone records, okay? Doesn't mean they don't have to give them up, but it notifies them that they're going to be giving up these phone records. Now, what Judge Boasberg did was sign an order saying, I'm hereby ordering AT&T, you do not tell Senator Cruz that we're doing this, okay? That's by order of the court itself. That order is in violation of pre-existing and well-established federal law. That's the hook here, okay? That's the hook for Representative Gill. The applicable law that Judge Boasberg's order is in violation of is 2 United States Code Section 6628, specifically subsection C. Because that law, which uses the abbreviation SAA, and that is Sergeant at Arms. So we're talking about the Sergeant at Arms for the Senate here, okay? That law specifically and unequivocally states, notwithstanding any other provision of law or rule of civil or criminal procedure, the office of the SAA, any officer, employee, or agent of the office of the SAA, and any provider for a Senate office that is providing services to or used by a Senate office shall not be barred through the operation of any court order or any statutory provision from notifying the Senate office of any legal process seeking disclosure of Senate data of the Senate office. Okay? In simple terms, you cannot issue a court order that then prohibits any service provider from notifying that particular senator's office as well as the sergeant of arms. But a federal judge who presumably would know what federal law states signed an order basically ordering these cell phone companies to violate federal law. So, does that constitute an abuse of power or potentially criminal activity or a serious ethical violation? Because Judge Boasberg, just like Senator Cruz, just like me, we are all members of the Bar Association in various states, which means we have certain ethical obligations that we must comply with at all times. So yeah, Representative Gill has actually drafted some pretty good articles of impeachment. So are we going to get Judge Boasberg impeached? No, we're not. And here's why, and it really doesn't come down to law, and it doesn't come down to the Constitution. It comes down to something far easier than that. It's called math, okay? Because the way the process works is the articles of impeachment must pass out of the House of Representatives, and it only needs to pass out by a simple majority, which means if that vote went down along party lines, there is in fact enough votes to pass the articles of impeachment out of the House. It then goes to the Senate, where it would be tried. There are procedures set forth for how the trial is conducted. We need not bore ourselves with that because in order for Judge Boasberg to be convicted under the Articles of Impeachment, it would require a 2/3 vote. Okay? Now, the Republicans right now don't even have the 60 votes necessary to actually pass any legislation out of the Senate, and they would actually need 67 votes in order to actually convict Judge Boasberg, or anybody for that matter, under articles of impeachment currently before the United States Senate. So our prediction here is, yeah, these articles of impeachment could very easily make it out of the House of Representatives and head over to the Senate for trial. I think we've been through this exercise of futility a couple of times in recent memory, actually. But the likelihood that you're going to get 67 votes in the United States Senate to impeach Judge Boasberg, well, that's somewhere between slim and none. Well, and now you understand how to impeach a judge or how difficult it really is, and that would probably explain why there's only been 15 impeachments of federal judges in the history of the United States, and of those, only 8 of them actually resulted in convictions. All right, listen, we'll go ahead and link up all the laws down below so you can geek out on it for yourself. You don't have to take our word for it. If you got any other questions about this or the stuff we normally cover here at Washington Gun Law, you should know how to get a hold of us by now, but if you don't, that's okay. That information is down there in the description box. If you got an idea for a video we should do around here, click on that link right there and tell us all about it. If you want to subscribe to the monthly newsletter, the ability to do that is down there in the description box. And then finally, and most importantly, let's remember, a part of being a lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about here normally, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching. Stay safe.